The commanding officer of the USS Forrestal and Admiral Ill, Commander Task Force 60, Com Car Group 6, Commander Carrier Group 6. Welcome aboard this morning. As Commander Cherry just indicated, we will begin with the mandatory small film to introduce those of you who have not been introduced to it to carrier operations. When we have finished that, there'll be a short break, and I regret I too am a smoker, 3 packs a day, and it is a habit that I've had, what has happened in the exercise, etc. There is a handout that goes with that brief, and then on to some remarks. So, without further ado, can everybody hear me all right? I'm not used to this, not being a public relations officer. Why don't we start the film?
Pilots came back to land on the deck of the aircraft carrier. Putting 20 tons of airplane on a patch of heaving, rolling carrier deck created more tension and pressure than dodging surface-to-air missiles, even among the most experienced pilots. It's probably the single biggest test of airmanship, and flight crews make no pretense about it either. Even with the self-confidence inherent in all good pilots, men fly their aircraft to the limits of its performance and stake their lives on their own flying ability. Even these pilots long remember their carrier landings, especially in bad weather, with ceiling...
Working aboard on behalf of Commander 6th Fleet, Admiral Moranville, who is aboard at this time also. He's the officer that scheduled this exercise, Seawind. And I presume that that's why you're here, to cover exercise Seawind. As John said, I'm Commander Carrier Group 6, also Battle Force 6th Fleet. So I kind of run the ships. Commander of 6th Fleet, of course, owns us all. He's aboard with the Chief of Naval Operations of the Egyptian Navy. This afternoon we're going to have what we call a hot wash-up for Seawind, which explains to both sides of how the exercise is going, has gone, what the good parts of the exercise. A little further out so we can, in this area, so that we can have the air power demonstration this afternoon that you'll see about 1300 when it's 1 o'clock. So essentially we're just about straight north of Alexandria. Going to do the firepower demonstration out here, which we do is drop live bombs into the water, so we don't want to be too close to the beach or the operating areas. And when you came aboard, we were in just inside of 50 miles, so that your helicopter ride wouldn't be too long. Moving out right now a little further away, so when we drop the bombs, there won't be any problems. And again this afternoon about 4 p.m. we'll be moving back in so that your helicopter ride won't be too long to the beach. Just north of Cairo and Alexandria is our operating area for this exercise, for the at-sea part of it. The at-land part of it, of course, is right down in this area and just south of the Cairo area. John will give you the particulars, exactly what we're doing in Seawind.
You canceled the stop in Haifa after the exercises are finished, and they're going to head in the direction of Libya. Can you confirm that report for us?
Well, I can confirm that they canceled the port call in Haifa, which kind of disappoints us all. That's one port that I haven't been into in the Mediterranean, and I was looking forward to that. But as far as the operations, why it's canceled, there's any number of reasons that Libya is not really in consideration. We don't, of course, you know that I can't really talk about what operations we will be doing ahead of time. And part of the problem is that usually I don't know until we're all ready to do them and they tell us. But essentially, there's a number of reasons why we cancel port calls, and part of it is usually direction from Washington, either to go someplace else, save fuel, do some different training. It depends on this particular exercise. Of course, it's been scheduled for I think 2 years now, isn't it, John?
Yes, sir.
The Seawind exercise. So that's the Haifa port visit was just something that was scheduled about a month or so ago. So our port schedules kind of bounce around. the schedule we're really trying to stick to, of course, is the exercise schedule to make sure that we get the proper training, so we're at peak readiness as much as possible in the Mediterranean.
You should know, maybe it was late last night that I think it was the Pentagon announced that the Haifa port call had been canceled. So
it has been canceled. They told us last night, yeah.
So that the Forrestal could go and sail in the waters north of Libya as another warning to Colonel Gaddafi. This seemed to be an official statement.
They didn't tell us that part, but they told us that they were canceling our in-port Haifa.
What is your state of readiness right now? And has it been increased at all in the last day or two, or in the last week or so?
That's the whole purpose of these kind of exercises, is to increase our readiness, our training readiness, so that the air crews and the ships that are working here are more ready. And that's the main purpose of doing exercise, and that's what we're doing this week with the Egyptians. Both on the surface and the aircraft are increasing our readiness, combat readiness.
But maybe I meant state of alert. Is there a grade of state of alert that
No, just our exercise state of alert. That, of course, we're opposing each other. Matter of fact, we've even got mixed operations where we've got the Egyptians and the U.S. airplanes working together, attacking the rest of our forces, and same with the airplanes. Mixed bag. So our alert readiness is in reaction to what we're doing against each other.
There were reports that the flight patterns would be entering the Tripoli flight information region. Have they entered that region, and how close have
none of our Seawind exercise is scheduled anywhere near the Libyan flight information region, and we haven't gone over there.
Exactly how far from the shores of Egypt will the exercises be taking place? You mentioned that 50-mile
No,
line.
that's just that. I just mentioned that for this afternoon. That's John will cover that in particular as far as where the exercise is going on. But the 50 miles was just because we're dropping live bombs in the water, and they're going to explode. So we didn't want to be too close to the beach to excite people on the beach. So we'll be outside 50 miles for that. But our exercise, it's not only over the water; it's over parts of Egypt.
Oh yes, but the water part will be between 50 miles and how many miles?
No, not necessarily. We can show you on the chart, but it's probably most of it will be within 70 miles and to the beach and over the beach.
What's the closest you've gotten to Libyan airspace or Libyan waters, or what the Libyans would call their waters?
I don't know.
I don't think we ought to get
I don't know
into
if I
that
can
area.
really. You can tell by the chart. It's well a ways. Sure.
What can you tell us what we're going to see today?
That'll be covered by Commander Herfelder.
Obviously, isn't your
That's
area.
not my bag now.
Just as a professional sailor, can you say whether these maneuvers should be considered provocative in any way to any third countries?
I can say that these maneuvers shouldn't be provocative at all. They've been scheduled for 2 years, and I don't know how you can schedule 2 years ahead of time to be provocative. And we haven't done any more than what we plan to do, really. And of course, the third world can see whatever they want to see and say whatever they want to say. But like I say, it's been that way for 2 years now.
This precise time as well, or just sometime in 1986?
Well, essentially, I think it's the precise time.
Yeah.
It's something we do every year about this time. Last year it was with the Nimitz, and we also did. We had the Marines down here and did some landings on Egypt and that type of stuff. This year we don't have the Marines with us. It's just the ships and the airplanes. But it's something that we do for training every year about this time.
Are you at all concerned about the threats from Libya that that this is provocative and that they may try to take action against the United States?
No, you never know what Libya is going to do.
But I mean the ship itself. Are you on guard against a possible Libyan attack?
You know, we're on guard all the time for anything. That's the name of being ready for anything. Okay, gents.
Work outside, and it is not directed against any nation. It is a general training exercise, involving Egyptian forces and United States naval forces. And as the Admiral explained, it is in fact conducted in international waters and over Egyptian airspace. The exercise, as the Admiral indicated, has in fact been scheduled for 2 years for this time frame. Started with Seawind 84. We did an exercise at about this time last year called Bright Star, and this is the follow-on. It's not a new exercise. Obviously, as I just said, we have done joint exercises before. And the government of Egypt has in fact conducted joint exercises this year with both the United Kingdom and France. If you look at the participants, it is consistent with that. Would you be good enough to turn those slides for me? Vice Admiral Ali Mohammed Gad, Commander-in-Chief of the Egyptian Navy. The United States OSE, Officer scheduling the exercise. Vice Admiral Kendall E. Moranville, Commander of the United States Sixth Fleet. And finally, Admiral Ilg, who just spoke to you, who in this case is Commander Task Force 60, also Commander Carrier Group 6. Those are the principals involved. And if we look at the your next sheet, so other events that are woven into the exercise, they really come, the two that I've chosen to pick out because they are the major ones, are obviously DV, Distinguished Visitor. That's the event that you're taking part in right now. As we gather the principles of the exercise and talk about lessons learned, we talk about the preceding types of events, and generally, I hope, have a good lunch. The second thing that we have talked about, because it is a little bit different, is the Egyptian Air Force participating in the E2C. Go back, if you will, to my air intercept events. As I said, exercise in every E2C that was flown in support of the exercise, one seat in the aircraft, except events. And that's a little bit different for us. Good training, very good cross-training, helps us understand the unique air patterns and air flows over Egypt, which is size that I just talked to you about, took place yesterday. Essentially, the carrier has operated to give it flight room, to give it time to marshal its aircraft overhead and arrange its flights into various places between 75 and 90, actually 75 to 100 nautical miles offshore there. The surface events have taken place, they are being generically about there. The surface events have taken place a little bit closer to the Egyptian landmass, somewhere about 30 nautical miles off. Most of the Egyptian surface events have taken place to give us separation between the aircraft carrier and the surface events. Obviously, if we're going to shoot guns at sleds and shoot guns at tow aircraft, we need to declare a zone, despite reports to the contrary. That, in a nutshell, are the events of Seawind 86. The types of training that have been done. Obviously, the full results are not in yet on the full results are not yet in on the air events because they're not complete. But to date, the air events have in fact been successful. I'm sorry, not used to this thing. Now, I should say that I'll be happy to take any questions, but instead I'll just say I will take questions.
On the exercise involving the opposed airstrikes, can you tell us exactly where that occurred, the number of aircraft involved, and were there any aircraft involved that were not from the carrier, that were from some other location?
I'm thinking because there's a lot of data to process in that. Let me make sure I got all of the questions. All right. Were there aircraft involved that were not from the carrier? Yes, there were Egyptian aircraft involved. Give it to me one piece at a time.
Were there any U.S. aircraft involved that were not from the carrier?
No, sir, there were not.
And
all U.S. aircraft involved in that exercise were in fact carrier-based aircraft. Second question. I got to take a little bit at a time. I'm not too fast.
And just simply, how many aircraft were involved in that, and
Charlie,
what was the strike zone?
The typical OAS strike consisted of what? A package of six?
Strike would be between six or seven aircraft, American aircraft, flying over the beach against a particular airfield. And and then Egyptian aircraft would intercept our aircraft as they were coming in.
As for the targets, the simulated targets, I would prefer that the Egyptian Air Force address that question. And I had a little finger waving over there. Two little fingers waving over there. Yes, sir.
When we were flying out here in the helicopters, off to the right, a few minutes before we came to the carrier, there were 5 ships over on the right side.
I hope they were.
Were those all American ships or a combination of Egyptian-American?
No, what you were looking at as you flew out, if you give me the time, the rough time that you saw them, I can tell you what they were doing.
It was about 4 or 5 minutes before we got here.
Okay. What you were looking at was either the end of the underway replenishment, and those were the ships that I mentioned earlier, Pawcatuck, Belknap, T.C. Hart, Wainwright, Suez, Abu Qir, as a minimum. And they were arranging themselves for an overhead photo. The helicopter had just taken, so they were either finishing that event or starting it, depending on which helicopter took the pictures.
I see.
It should have been about 40 miles from us. And then they will finish the afternoon doing the rest of the tactical maneuvering drills that I talked about.
And can you give some data or some facts on the on the overall maneuvers? How many? We have the number of ships involved, but how many U.S. service personnel are involved? How many Egyptian personnel are involved? You know, these kinds of basic facts.
Commander, can you help me out on that? I would be pulling numbers. That's of 300. You're somewhere around 7,500 USN personnel. And I think the Egyptian Air Force and the Egyptian Navy would have to give you their numbers. I don't know what their manning is per platform. But 7,500 is not off by much for us.
And that's the total American contingent. There are no other non-naval people involved.
No, sir. No, sir.
Could you discuss the program for today? I know that's a bit boring. But
It's not boring to me. Yes, the itinerary.
yes.
At the risk of... You have seen sea legs.
Getting the message in the wires call.
4, F-16. Here we go.
4-1.